The roar of diesel engines shattered the morning silence as Detective Sarah Chen watched helplessly through her kitchen window massive bulldozers tearing through her grandmother's rose garden, ripping up the oak tree where she'd carved her initials as a child. Her badge felt heavy in her trembling hand as she realized the construction crew had no idea they were about to face the one person in this corrupt city who could destroy them all with a single phone call. But as the dust settled and she stepped outside to confront them, Sarah discovered something that would turn her world upside down. The demolition order bore the signature of someone she trusted more than anyone else. Detective Sarah Chen had always been an early riser, but this Tuesday morning, she'd allowed herself the luxury of sleeping until 7. The sunlight filtered through the lace curtains of her grandmother's Victorian home, now her home casting delicate patterns across the hardwood floors. She padded to the kitchen in her flannel pajamas, brewing coffee the way Nai had taught her, strong enough to wake the dead, sweet enough to honor the living. The first tremor shook the china cups in their saucers. Sarah paused, coffee mug halfway to her lips. Living 3 blocks from the metro line meant occasional vibrations, but this felt different, heavier, more deliberate. The second tremor rattled the windows, and she heard something that made her blood run cold, the growl of heavy machinery. She rushed to the front window and felt her world collapse. 2 yellow bulldozers were advancing across her front yard, like mechanical beasts, their steel blades already churning through Nai's prized rose garden. The 100-year-old oak tree, the one where she'd carved SC plus MK forever when she was 16 and stupid enough to believe in forever, groaned under the assault of the lead dozer's blade. No. Sarah threw open the front door, still clutching her coffee mug. Stop. The morning air bit at her skin through the thin flannel, but adrenaline kept her warm as she ran barefoot across the frost-covered grass. The lead bulldozer operator, a heavy-set man with a gray beard and reflective sunglasses, continued his methodical destruction as if she were invisible. Sarah positioned herself directly in front of the machine, arms spread wide. I said, "Stop." The operator finally looked down at her, his expression a mixture of annoyance and mild amusement. He killed the engine with theatrical slowness, and sudden silence fell over the scene like a blanket. The second operator followed suit, and Sarah became aware of other sounds: car doors slamming, boots on gravel, and the crackle of radio static. "Ma'am, you need to move away from the equipment." The voice belonged to a tall man in a hard hat and fluorescent vest, who approached with the swagger of someone accustomed to being obeyed. His clipboard looked official, his tone patronizing. "This is a designated work zone. This is my property." Sarah's voice cracked with fury and disbelief. "My house? My yard?" She gestured helplessly at the mangled roses, their red petals scattered like drops of blood across the churned earth. The man, his name tag, Reed Jenkins, site supervisor, consulted his clipboard with exaggerated importance. "According to the city records, this property at 1847 Maple Street has been condemned for public development. The demolition order was filed and approved 3 weeks ago. That's impossible. I live here. I own this house." "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. If you have a problem with the paperwork, you need to take it up with city planning." Jenkins waved his hand dismissively. "Now please move so we can complete our work." Sarah felt something snap inside her chest, not quite her heart, but something close to it. This house wasn't just property. It was sanctuary. After Nai's death 6 months ago, after the divorce papers were signed and Marcus took everything else, this Victorian with its creaky floors and stubborn radiators had been her lifeline. Every morning she drank coffee in the kitchen where 3 generations of Chen women had started their days. Every evening she sat on the porch swing where Nai had told her stories about surviving the Cultural Revolution, about building a new life in America with nothing but determination and hope. "You don't understand," Sarah said, her voice steadier now, but carrying an edge that made Jenkins take a step back. "There's been a mistake, a big one." She pulled her badge from her pajama, habit so ingrained she could have done it in her sleep. The gold shield caught the morning light as she held it up, and she watched the color drain from Jenkins' face. "Detective Sarah Chen, Metro Police, and unless you want to explain to a judge why you destroyed the private property of a law enforcement officer without proper notification, I suggest you shut down this operation immediately." Jenkins' mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The bulldozer operators climbed down from their machines, suddenly very interested in examining their boots. A small crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk, drawn by the commotion, and Sarah could feel their eyes on her. "Detective, we had no idea." Jenkins fumbled with his clipboard, papers fluttering in the morning breeze. "The work order came down from the mayor's office. Special priority development project. We were told the property was vacant. Well, as you can see, it's not vacant." Sarah's training kicked in. Control the scene, gather information, identify the real problem, show me the paperwork. Jenkins handed over the clipboard with trembling fingers. Sarah scanned the documents, her detective's eye automatically cataloging details: official city letterhead, multiple signatures, property description matching her address, and her blood turned to ice water. At the bottom of the demolition order, in the flowing script she'd seen on birthday cards and Christmas presents for the past 15 years, was the signature of Deputy Mayor Catherine Morrison, Kate, her mentor, her friend, the woman who'd stood beside her at Nine-Eye's funeral and promised that family meant never facing the world alone. Sarah stared at the signature until the letters blurred. There had to be an explanation. Kate couldn't have signed an order to destroy her home. Not Kate, who'd helped her through the police academy, who'd been maid of honor at her wedding, who'd held her while she cried after the divorce. Detective Jenkins' voice seemed to come from very far away. "Are you all right?" Sarah folded the papers with mechanical precision, her mind racing through possibilities. Forgery, mistake, mix-up in the filing system, anything except the obvious conclusion that someone she trusted had betrayed her in the most personal way possible. "I need to make some calls," she said finally. "Nothing else gets touched until I sort this out. And I mean nothing, not a blade of grass, not a pebble in the driveway. Are we clear?" "Yes, ma'am. Absolutely." Jenkins began barking orders at his crew, but Sarah barely heard him. She walked back toward her house, glass crunching under her bare feet from a broken window probably shattered by the vibrations. Each step felt like walking through quicksand, the world tilting off its axis with every revelation. Inside, she reached for her phone with shaking hands and dialed Kate's direct line at City Hall. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times, before Kate's familiar voice answered. "Catherine Morrison." "Kate, it's Sarah. I need to know why there are bulldozers in my front yard." Silence stretched between them, filled with the weight of 15 years of friendship and something that felt suspiciously like guilt. "Sarah," Kate's voice was carefully neutral, the tone she used in budget meetings and press conferences. "I was hoping to reach you before." "Before what?" "Before you had my house demolished without telling me?" "It's not that simple. The Riverside development project is—" "I don't care about your development project." Sarah's voice cracked. "I care about my home. I care about the fact that my best friend just tried to have my house bulldozed while I was sleeping inside it." Another silence, longer this time. When Kate spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Sarah, you have to understand. The federal grant requires us to clear the entire block. If we don't meet the deadline, the city loses $40 million in funding. I tried to find another way, but you didn't try hard enough to pick up the phone and warn me. I sent you a registered letter 3 weeks ago. When you didn't respond, I assumed I never got any letter." Sarah's mind was spinning, trying to process the enormity of what Kate was telling her. "You're saying you've known about this for 3 weeks, and you said nothing? At Rosie's birthday party last weekend? At the precinct barbecue? During our coffee date on Sunday? Nothing. I wanted to tell you in person, but every time I tried." Kate's voice trailed off, and Sarah could picture her in her corner office, staring out at the city skyline while choosing her words carefully. "Sarah, you have to believe me. This isn't personal. The greater good sometimes requires—" "Don't." Sarah's voice was deadly quiet. "Don't you dare talk to me about the greater good while my grandmother's roses are scattered across my lawn like confetti." She ended the call and stood in the sudden silence of her kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of her family's history. The coffee maker gurgled. The grandfather clock in the hallway ticked away the seconds. Outside, she could hear Jenkins trying to keep his crew occupied while they waited for her next move. Sarah walked to the window and looked out at the destruction. The oak tree lay on its side like a fallen giant, its massive trunk split. The Metro Police Internal Affairs Office occupied the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades, its fluorescent lights casting everything in a sickly yellow pallor that made even innocent people look guilty. Detective Rick Morrison, relation to Kate, despite the shared surname that had caused endless confusion over the years, sat behind a desk buried under case files, his weathered face grave as Sarah finished recounting the morning's events. "Let me get this straight," Rick said, tapping his pen against a legal pad covered in notes. "Deputy Mayor Morrison signed a demolition order for your property 3 weeks ago, claiming it was vacant, and you never received any notification." "That's right." Sarah had changed into jeans and a sweater, but she still felt exposed, raw from the morning's revelations. "And Rick, there's something else. I've been thinking about the timing." "What do you mean?" Sarah leaned forward, her detective instincts fully engaged now. "The Riverside Development Project. Kate mentioned it on the phone, said the city would lose $40 million in federal funding if they didn't meet the deadline. But I've been watching the city budget meetings for months. That project was never supposed to include residential properties." Rick's pen stopped tapping. "You're sure about that?" "Dead sure. The original proposal was for commercial redevelopment only, the old warehouse district down by the river. When did it expand to include my neighborhood?" "That's what we're going to find out." Rick stood up, grabbing his jacket from the back of his chair. "But first, I want to take a look at your property myself. Sometimes the scene tells a story, the paperwork doesn't." 20 minutes later, they stood in Sarah's front yard, surveying the damage in the harsh light of early afternoon. The bulldozers sat silent, their operators having retreated to a nearby diner. After Sarah's declaration that the property was part of an active investigation, yellow police tape fluttered around the perimeter, not exactly standard procedure for a civil matter, but Sarah's badge carried enough weight to make it stick. "Jesus, Sarah." Rick crouched beside the fallen oak tree, running his hand along the splintered wood. This tree had to be at least 60 years old. 87, Sarah corrected, her voice tight. Nai planted it when she first bought the house. She used to say it would outlive all of us. She kicked at a clump of earth, revealing the mangled remains of what had been a rosebush. They didn't just demolish randomly. Rick, look at the pattern. Rick stood up, following her gaze across the yard. Sarah was right, the destruction wasn't haphazard. The bulldozers had carved a precise path through the property, avoiding the house itself but systematically destroying everything that would be expensive to restore. The garden, the mature trees, the brick walkway that had been laid by hand in the 1940s. It's like they wanted to make sure you couldn't afford to rebuild, Rick observed. Or like they knew exactly what would hurt the most. Sarah's phone buzzed, and she glanced at the screen. Text from Kate. She wants to meet tonight to discuss the situation. Are you going? Sarah considered this. Every instinct told her to ignore Kate's message, to let internal affairs handle whatever corruption investigation might emerge from this mess. But underneath her anger was something else, a desperate need to understand how their friendship had come to this moment. Yeah, I'm going, but not alone, and not on her terms. She typed back a response. Rosie's Diner, 7 p.m., and Rick Morrison from IA will be joining us. Kate's reply came instantly. Sarah, this needs to be private. Nothing about this is private. Any more? Sarah texted back. Rick was examining the demolition paperwork again, his brow furrowed in concentration. Sarah, look at this. The work order shows 3 signatures, Mayor Henderson, Kate Morrison, and someone named David Chen from the Property Assessment Office. Sarah felt the ground shift beneath her feet. David Chen, you know him? He's my ex-husband's cousin. Marcus's family? Sarah's mind raced through the implications. I haven't spoken to David since the divorce, but he always resented that I kept the house when Marcus and I split up. Said it should have stayed in the Chen family. That's one hell of a coincidence. In my experience, there's no such thing as coincidence when it comes to family and money. Sarah pulled out her phone again, this time calling the Property Assessment Office directly. City Property Assessment. This is Jennifer. Hi Jennifer. This is Detective Sarah Chen with Metro Police. I need to speak with David Chen about a property assessment. Oh, I'm sorry, Detective, but David's not in today. Actually, he called in sick yesterday and today. Is this urgent? Sarah exchanged a look with Rick. Do you have his home address on file? I can't give out personal information over the phone, but if this is police business, it is. Can you confirm he worked on the assessment for 1847 Maple Street? A pause, the sound of typing. Yes, that shows in his recent case files, completed about a month ago. Thank you, Jennifer. Sarah hung up and immediately dialed another number. Detective Williams, Tommy, it's Sarah. I need a favor. Can you run a wellness check on David Chen? She rattled off the address she'd memorized from Christmas cards over the years. And Tommy, be careful. This might be connected to something bigger. You got it. I'm 5 minutes from that address anyway. While they waited for Tommy's call back, Sarah and Rick continued examining the scene. The black sedan she'd noticed earlier was nowhere to be seen, but Sarah had learned to trust her instincts about surveillance. She took photos of the tire tracks in her driveway, noting that they were too fresh to belong to the construction crew. Someone was watching the house this morning, she told Rick, probably waiting to see how I'd react to the demolition. Security cameras? Sarah shook her head. Nai was old school, didn't trust technology. But Mrs. Patterson next door has been watching this neighborhood like a hawk for 30 years. If anyone saw unusual activity, it would be her. They walked over to the neighboring house, a tidy bungalow with an immaculate front garden and lace curtains that seemed to twitch. With their own surveillance system, before they could knock, the door opened to reveal Eleanor Patterson, a woman in her 70s with sharp eyes and the posture of someone who'd spent decades teaching middle school. Detective Chen, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice warm but concerned. I was wondering when you'd come by. This morning was quite the commotion. Mrs. Patterson, did you notice anything unusual in the past few weeks? Cars that didn't belong? People watching the house? Oh my, yes. There was a black car parked across the street several times this week. Always around dinner time, and the driver never got out. I assumed it was someone from your department. Do you know how I worry about living next to a police officer? Rick stepped forward. Ma'am, can you describe the driver? Well, I couldn't see much through the tinted windows, but it was definitely a woman, short dark hair, always on the phone. She had a way of holding herself that reminded me of my daughter, you know, that executive posture. Sarah's blood chilled. She knew exactly one woman with short dark hair and executive posture who had reason to monitor her house. Mrs. Patterson? Was the car here this morning before the bulldozers arrived? Oh yes, she was here early, around 6:30 I'd say. Stayed until just after you came outside, then drove away quite quickly. Sarah's phone rang, cutting through her growing certainty about the surveillance. Tommy's name flashed on the screen. Sarah, we've got a problem. David Chen's not just sick, his apartment's been cleaned out. Neighbors say he moved out 3 days ago, no forwarding address. But here's the interesting part. His landlord says the lease was paid up through the end of the year by a cashier's check from City Hall. Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the pieces of the conspiracy clicking into place with nauseating clarity. Tommy, I need you to pull David's financial records for the past 6 months. Look for any large deposits, especially from city accounts or development companies. Already on it? Sarah, what the hell is going on? I'm starting to think my divorce wasn't the only thing that got orchestrated behind my back. After hanging up, Sarah turned to Rick. We need to trace the money trail. If Kate's been planning this for weeks, there will be financial records payments to David, contracts with the construction company, maybe even the federal grant paperwork. That's going to take time, and we'll need warrants for most of it. Then we'd better get started. Sarah looked back at her house, at the broken windows and destroyed garden. But first, I'm keeping that dinner appointment with Kate, if she's been watching my house. If she's been planning this demolition while pretending to be my friend, I want to hear her try to explain it. Rick nodded grimly. And I'll be right there to witness whatever story she tries to sell. As they walked back toward their cars, Sarah's phone buzzed with another message from Kate. Please don't bring IA. There are things you don't understand. Sarah showed the message to Rick, who whistled low. She's scared. Good she should be. Sarah typed back. The only thing I don't understand is how my best friend became my enemy. See you at 7. But as they drove away from Maple Street, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that Kate's fear wasn't about getting caught in a corruption scheme. It felt deeper than that, more desperate, like someone who was trapped in a situation that had spiraled far beyond their control. The question was trapped. Sarah's apartment, her real apartment, not the house on Maple Street, sat above a 24-hour laundromat in a neighborhood where people minded their own business and cash transactions raised no eyebrows. She'd kept the lease as a safe house during her years working undercover narcotics, a habit that now might save her life. The key was still taped under the fire escape landing where she'd left it 6 months ago. 11:47 p.m., 13 minutes until the arrest warrant went active. She sat on the bare mattress in the studio apartment, her service weapon disassembled on the scarred wooden table, cleaning each piece with methodical precision while her mind raced through the evidence against her. Bank deposits, surveillance, photos, David Chen's convenient disappearance. It was a perfect frame, too perfect to be coincidental. Her burner phone, another remnant from her undercover days, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. They're moving early. 3 units heading to Maple Street now. A friend. Sarah's blood chilled. Someone was feeding her information. But who? And why? She reassembled her weapon, secured it in her shoulder holster, and grabbed the go bag she'd packed with fake IDs, cash, and ammunition. 22 years as a cop had taught her that survival often depended on preparation for scenarios you hoped would never happen. The laundromat below hummed with late-night activity shift workers cleaning uniforms and seeking the comfort of mundane tasks. Sarah slipped out through the back exit and into the maze of alleys that connected this part of the city like arteries through a body she knew intimately. Her first stop was a 24-hour internet cafe in Chinatown, the kind of place where customers paid in cash and privacy was the primary service offered. Sarah claimed a terminal in the back corner and began her real investigation. David Chen's financial records, when she finally hacked into them using credentials she probably shouldn't have remembered, told a story that made her stomach turn. Regular deposits from Chen Family Enterprises? Yes, but also payments to something called Riverside Holdings LLC. Cross-referencing property records showed that Riverside Holdings owned most of the warehouse district slated for demolition. The same warehouse district where Kate said trafficking victims had been found dead? Sarah dug deeper, following digital breadcrumbs through shell companies and offshore accounts. Riverside Holdings was owned by Pacific Development Group, which was controlled by Morrison Investment Trust, which traced back to ... Catherine Morrison. Sarah stared at the screen, her reflection ghost-like in the monitor's glow. Kate hadn't just known about the money laundering, she was running it. The deputy mayor position was perfect cover for a corruption scheme that stretched from City Hall to the docks, using federal development grants to legitimize drug money while human trafficking provided additional revenue streams. But if Kate was the mastermind, why had she warned Sarah at the diner? Why risk exposure to save someone she was framing? The answer came in the form of another text to her burner phone. Check your email, the real one. A friend. Sarah logged into her personal email account and found a message from an address she didn't recognize, sent just 20 minutes ago. The subject line read, "The insurance policy you never knew you had." The email contained a single video file. Sarah plugged in earbuds and hit play. The footage was grainy, clearly shot from a hidden camera, but the audio was crystal clear. She was looking at Kate's office at City Hall, and Kate was on the phone with someone, her voice tight. With stress, "I don't care what the FBI thinks, they know. Sarah Chen is not part of this operation, and I won't let you destroy her to protect our assets." A man's voice responded tinny through the phone speaker. "She's a liability. Kate, her house sits on property that can expose the entire network. If she starts digging into her grandmother's finances, then we remove the house, not the detective. Sarah trusts me. I can handle this without bloodshed." The Chen family wants her dead. They think she knows about David's arrangement with us. The Chen family can go to hell. I'm not authorizing a hit on a police officer. Sarah's hands trembled as she paused the video. Kate had been protecting her, even while framing her, but protecting her from whom? The man's voice on the recording continued, "Fine, frame her for the money laundering. Let the feds arrest her, and she'll be someone else's problem. But Kate, if this goes sideways, if she figures out what we're really doing down at the docks, she won't. I'll make sure of it. You'd better. Because if Detective Chen starts investigating those shipping containers, we'll all be dead within a week." The video ended. Sarah sat in the fluorescent glow of the internet cafe, pieces of a larger puzzle crystallizing in her mind. Shipping containers, the docks, human trafficking victims found dead in warehouses scheduled for demolition. This wasn't just about money laundering, it was about covering up something much worse. She pulled up shipping manifests for the port of Metro City, cross-referencing them with dates when trafficking victims had been reported missing. The pattern was there, hidden in the bureaucratic maze of import-export documentation. Containers arriving from Southeast Asia, cleared through customs with minimal inspection, then moved to warehouses owned by Riverside Holdings, and the customs inspector who'd signed off on most of these shipments. Detective Marcus Chen's uncle, William Chen, who worked for Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Sarah's ex-husband's family wasn't just laundering money. They were running a full-scale human trafficking operation through the port, using their connections in law enforcement and city government to avoid detection. The money laundering was just how they cleaned the profits. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Tommy Williams. "Sarah, where the hell are you? There are feds crawling all over your place, and they're asking questions about evidence tampering." Evidence tampering? Someone broke into the evidence locker at the precinct tonight, took files related to the Chen family investigation, plus some other cases involving the warehouse district. Security footage shows someone with access codes, but the face is obscured. Sarah closed her eyes. The frame was tightening around her. "Tommy, I need you to listen carefully. I'm being set up for something I didn't do, but I can't explain over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere safe?" "Sarah, if you're innocent, you should turn yourself in. Let Aya sort this out." "Aya is compromised." "Hell, I don't know who isn't compromised at this point." A long pause. "Where do you want to meet?" "The old steel mill on Harbor Road. 1 hour." "Sarah, that place has been condemned for years." "Exactly. And Tommy, come alone, and watch your back. I think this thing goes deeper than either of us realized." Sarah logged out of the computer, paid her tab, and melted back into the city's shadows. The steel mill was a 20-minute walk through industrial districts, where security cameras were sparse, and the homeless population provided natural camouflage. She'd used the location for clandestine meetings during her undercover years, when trust was a luxury and paranoia kept you alive. The abandoned mill squatted against the harbor like a rusted monument to the city's industrial past. Sarah entered through a gap in the fence she'd used dozens of times before, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space as she climbed to the second-floor office that offered clear sightlines of all approaches. Tommy arrived exactly on time, his police-issue flashlight cutting through the darkness as he picked his way through the debris. Sarah watched him from her perch, looking for signs that he'd been followed. When she was satisfied he was alone, she whistled softly a signal they'd used during their patrol days. "Jesus, Sarah," Tommy said as she emerged from the shadows, "you look like hell. Feel worse." "Tommy, I need to know if you trust me." "Of course I do. We've been partners for 8 years. Then I need you to believe me when I tell you that everything we think we know about the Chen family investigation is wrong. They're not just laundering money, they're trafficking people. And someone in the department has been protecting them." Tommy's flashlight beam wavered slightly. "That's a hell of an accusation. I have proof." Sarah pulled out a flash drive she'd prepared at the internet cafe. Financial records, shipping manifests, even a recording of Deputy Mayor Morrison discussing the operation. "But Tommy, the feds think I'm part of it. They're going to arrest me, and once I'm in custody, this evidence will disappear." "So what do you want me to do? Help me get to the docks?" "There's a container ship that arrived 3 days ago, the Jade Phoenix. If I'm right, it's carrying more than just legitimate cargo." Tommy studied her face in the dim light. "And if you're wrong, then I'll turn myself in and face whatever charges they want to throw at me. But if I'm right, we're looking at a conspiracy that involves human trafficking, murder, and corruption that goes all the way to the mayor's office." A new voice cut through the darkness. "I'm afraid Detective Chen won't be going anywhere." 3 figures emerged from the shadows, their movements coordinated and professional. The man in the center wore an FBI windbreaker, but something about his posture screamed military rather than federal law enforcement. The other 2 flanked him with the precision of a tactical team. "Special Agent Morrison," the man said, his voice carrying a slight accent Sarah couldn't place. "You've caused us quite a bit of trouble." Sarah's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon, but stopped when she